Awesome. So this is a video response to Inmendham. I got to speak with Inmendham briefly in the hangout on Sunday, so that was pretty exciting. It didn't get to go very far as he wasn't in the room very long because of the eating faces deal. Okay. Fine. He made a response video, that's great. That way he can take the time to say all the things that he needs to say. And this video, he kind of takes the bait. He trying to gives all these examples, like to and red and cold and different and sweetness. Although sweetness was one from the other video. It also to do with the other video and Hytho Day's cubes in a bucket thing about the law of non-contradiction, or as I'd say, the general principle of non-contradiction or whatnot. But we'll get into the specific examples later. I'm going to talk about, how much certainty can we get versus how much is it always going to be subjective. Inmendham does not like subjectivism, right? I mean, that's obvious, right? He doesn't like the indeterminism, especially here, right? He's accusing of that the goalposts are always changing, and that's unfair if you don't know where the goalpost is. It gets to the point, I completely sympathize with Inmendham here, right? It gets to the point where change the rules so much that words don't even mean anything anymore, right? I sometimes say this is, can we not say Socrates is a man anymore? You get so many rules when you get rules that contradict each other, then you can't say anything. And that's part of the problem, because all these rules exist. They're created from ourselves, but they're all necessary for trying to figure out the truth, but the truth gets complicated. We're going to look at this Mandelbrot set here. Here's the original shape, and occasionally through this video you might see the shape again, right, where this shape has all these universes inside it, and then we'll see this shape inside those universes, making more universes, more inside the shape, inside the shape, inside the shape. We'll just get it started here. So there it is again, right? And then we're coming in to this spiral, and all it is zooming, right? Now we're down to the 10 to the negative 10th scope, and we just keep zooming in, closer and closer and closer, and smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's just more and more complexity. We're never going to get to the end of this thing. Oh, there's the shape again. And then we just keep going inwards and inwards and inwards. Now, there's a simple function. It's not that simple, but there's a function that describes this whole thing. And imagine being in this little part of the thing. There's an infinite amount of information in this little part. And imagine trying to figure that out from inside there, right? And doing maybe statistics on the infinite number of data points up in here to try and figure out that original function. It's going to get all kinds of wacky paradoxes. So we're trying to describe something that's infinitely complex with simple stuff, and it gets wacky. That's just how it is. It's not that the goalposts are changing. It's just that there's so many goalposts, right? It seems unfair, we can't even say anything, but what we're describing is existence, and existence is unfair. So the best we can do is what Pyro and Kantavat are talking about, with making generalizations of, we can kind of approximate some truth. We can't know specifically to an nth degree exactly how much, but we can make some generalizations and provisionally agree to those generalizations. That's very different than saying words have no meaning. It's like words have provisional meaning. It's a different thing. It's not saying that words have more meaning when I say them than when you say them. It's just when you get into the nitty-gritties and the complexities of things, that's when it just gets tough sometimes. No, it's not running. So, with definitions, we can make a generalization of what a word means. In general, it'll get most of what's supposed to be included and exclude most of what's not supposed to be excluded. In my last video, I was kind of talking about sky. The other approach is to get a list of necessary and sufficient conditions to exactly describe the word, such that we include the right amount of sky and exclude what's not sky, right? It's like, how far do we have to go in the cave before the air in the cave is not sky? I went into more detail about that in a recent video, so I think I'll leave that there. The thing is, when we're trying to make some necessary and sufficient conditions, we're using words to do it. And so there's this self-referential paradox, and it kind of falls into that generalism kind of thing of what do words generally mean, what is their generally agreed upon meaning, which is problematic. That is subjective, right? It would be saying, most people don't agree with antinatalism, therefore antinatalism is wrong. That's exactly the kind of reasoning that we do use for general definitions of words. But again, general definitions of words are not exactly specific, they're general. So, if your claim is that we have to have some claim on absolute truth in order to have a discussion, you're saying, oh, I can't even talk to these people, and that general approximations of truth aren't good enough to be able to discuss ideas, then you're not acknowledging the infinite complexities of, say, the Mandelbrot set, that we get into when we talk about reasoning and these words and where are the limits of meaning. So again, there's a bunch of examples, and I love going through these because people always want examples of contradictions, but there's red and two and cold and different and sweetness, and I thought he had a flat war he talked about today. I think I'll give the flat war its own video. That's an interesting subject right there. But right, with let's start with two-ness. Okay, so he picks up a couple pencils, and he says this is two, but it's only two because he picked up that many. When you assign a number to things, you put them in a set, and it's you doing it. If I've got 4 pennies on the table, and I start expressing that in two-ness, well, I've got these two, 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 and I've got these two. Wow, that's a lot of pennies, right? No, you would want to say that's 4. But it's just because we grouped them in a group of 4. If I've got... Now, there's also the two-ness of just the number 2 itself, right? But that's a total extraction from reality. It's not referring to 2 things, it's just 2, which is just, it's completely abstract from reality. So, redness. Now, he's pointing to a shirt and saying, my shirt is red. That's problematic because it's not red, it's brown. Red is a primary color, right? So there's one specific wavelength that is red. And if, like a general description of red would be between 620 and 650 nanometers for its wavelength. Notice how those are both divisible by 10, right? We kind of stuck some bars on there. But all of those, except for one specific wavelength, are all brown. They're not really red because red is that primary goodness, right? Those other colors have some blueness in them. Um, and so they're brown. Everything's brown. Everybody's got, we see it around the world. This is a little bit of red, this is a little bit of blue, it's got a little bit of yellow, all up in that one little spot. It's a mixture of the primary colors. So yeah, we can stick on some arbitrary lines and say, okay, it's between 620 and 750 nanometers for the wavelength, and that's what red is. But again, that's the generally agreed upon definition. It's just generally agreed upon because, well, we've come to an agreement that says this is red. It's pretty arbitrary. We're talking about tunis of redness. He talks about difference, and he's like, I've got these two pencils. Oh, that's another thing about the tunis, right? With the two pencils, he's sharpened them so that he can write with them. So they're no longer a whole pencil. So to call them two pencils, again, it really depends on a lot of subjectivity. And I'm sorry, that's just how it is. It's not like I'm doing this to you. Okay, but he talks about the two pencils being different, right? Because they're not located spatially in the same spot. But not all things that are one thing are located spatially in the same spot, right? Such as poverty. Poverty is kind of here, it's here, it's here, it's here, and it's all kind of one thing. There's Bose-Einstein condensates, which again, that's quantum physics, but it's some particle that it's in a bunch of different spaces all at one time. I don't know. I don't really like to talk about that quantum physics stuff, but it seems to come up, that's good enough examples for that. Right, so he's saying these two pencils are different because their spatialness, even though they're both pencils, they're both made out of wood. They both have the purpose of writing. There's a lot of sameness to them. But in the idea of spatiality, they're in different places. They're two different pencils. I mean, provisionally, we can totally agree to that. But his whole argument, right, or part of his argument, is about the same thing that we went into a few months ago about should I treat something that's not in the same spatial spot as me as the same because I recognize its sentience. Right? So what I'm saying is that Inmendham is the one that sets these goalposts and then sets them where he wants to be for his argument. He has decided which words have meaning, like love and happiness. He's like, oh, love, that has no meaning, but this other word, value, I'm going to assign some meaning to it, even though there's nobody that's doing the valuing. Right, so if I'm trying to use an axiom, like happiness exists, then he wants to start questioning it, right? If the axiom is the shirt is red, and I want to start questioning it, then he's like, no, what, you don't even use words anymore. If I want to say happiness exists, then he wants to start getting into the nitty-gritty details, right? And that's important to do in all cases, to explore the paradox, to get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, learn more and more and more. Again, I value completeness over consistency. I want to know more. I want to keep diving into all these little shapes and see what's going on there. So without exploring the details, in Inmendham's argument, we've basically go straight from premise to conclusion and say, like, sentience has value, therefore we should destroy it. Right? That's pretty contradictory until we start exploring the nitty-gritty details about, what is value. So, right, when I did get to talk to him briefly in the room, he was talking about wanting to value like a show that talks about curing cancer more than a show that shows football. And obviously we see a lot more football than we do see shows about cancer, right? And I was like, well, but you said it's not about the thing that is being valued, that there's some intrinsic value to it, but it's not the desires of the people. It's not that they desire it. It's all confusing. It was better in the chat. Like, that made a good circle around. So, because it came back to round, I was like, well, is it, they have value, but you don't value the fact that they desire football. And then it kind of comes back into, I prefer it if we valued shows about cancer, right? So we kind of came full circle around, which is fun. We're going to get into paradoxes and whatnot when we're trying to explore these, crazy shapes. So I want to set some specific goalposts for your argument, Inmendham, about value. And I want this concept of value that you've been talking about to be something that's not abstract, something that I don't have to put faith in to understand. So I'm looking for some technique in which we can then map it to a dollar amount of value, some specific amount of value, because that's useful, right? Then we can use that in calculations for environmentalism and say that the environment has this extra value in it, here's how much that is, and therefore we would hopefully listen to the calculations, which doesn't always work out, but at least have some calculations to show, hey, look, we should value the environment more because of what Inmendham has put forth. So that's my video for the day. I'm not sure how well, it's so hard to talk about these foundational things. But anyways, I'm always happy to hear responses. Thanks.